Hey Shaz, I've been away because I made a little Shazla. So, as you would have seen in the thumbnail today, we're going to be talking about the experimental prototype Cadre, which is the newest detachment that we got, and it is very, very exciting. Now, is it a little bit sad that it is like, making Retaliation Cadre look like we've got Battlesuit detachments at home? A little bit. There's reasons to take both, and we're going to talk about the opportunity costs that they've gone. Before we get started, if you like the video, make sure that you like and comment and subscribe to all the internet things, or don't. I'm not your dad. I'm his. So let's talk about experimental Cadre, because this offers something that Tau players have been wanting for quite a while, or at least I have, which is the return of some of our prototype weapons that we had in 9th that were taken as, well, they weren't called enhancements then, I believe they were relics, and some of our favorites are back, things like the thermoneutronic projector and fusion blades. Now, to address the elephant in the room, yes, fusion blades and thermoneutronic do not have a melee profile. However, anybody that's feeling a little bit sore about that, I want you to try and remove what your expectation was and what you wanted. And we saw this with the auxiliary Cadre, where people got in their heads about what they wanted and then were super bummed out when it came out, missing the obvious advantages that this new detachment got, or even the fact that we got a new detachment. Now we are one of 3 armies in the game that got a second new detachment after Grotmus, and that is incredibly exciting. Am I bummed that they didn't give us any meaningful rules changes or anything else? Yes, inarguably, I think that we have some problems. However, I can say that whoever made this detachment knows their shit, and they cooked. So let's talk about the different aspects of it. Here's my little grizzly bear. The easiest part to talk about is obviously the detachment rule, which flat adds 6 inches to all Tau Empire weapons. Now notice it says Tau Empire. There is not a single thing in our codex that does not have the keyword Tau Empire. This means Kroot. This means all of the Shapers. This means the Lone Spear. This means everybody. Everybody gets a flat 6 inches. Now, you wouldn't be faulted for thinking at immediately looking at this, well, this isn't really that great. Orcs got something that gave them both Kauyon and Montcar for the entirety of the game. However, 6 inches of range might feel like it's nothing. However, don't forget that in the current metagame, it can be easy for people to think, oh, well, Tau just outranges everybody, range isn't a problem. Range isn't a problem when you're playing against bad opponents or you're playing on tables that are way too open. When you're having to fight for every angle on the table, WTC, UKTC, GW, all of these things, angles matter. And the distance at which you can hit somebody is not only important for being able to kill them, but it's also important for staying out of range of things that they want to hit you with. Breaches not having to get within flamer range and triggering Overwatch is enormous. Do you know how many flamers are in the game at the moment? Aside from Eldari being one of our most natural predators with warp spiders, you've got Death Guard with a bunch of anti-infantry 2+ flamers. You had the Flamer Boys from Marines get massively buffed, as well as having a +1 to wound on their Oath target, naturally countering our -1 to wound. But if you tell your opponent that I don't have to get within your flamer range in order to overwatch you, but my flamers are 18 inches, that can be a nasty, nasty prospect. The other big winners from this detachment are obviously melter weapons. The melter range is based on half of the range. So if you're adding 3 inches to that half range, half of 6 being 3, you've got our 12-inch melters going to 18 inches, which means that it's 9. And there are some clear winners for this, which we'll be going through. And then you've got some of the bigger melters, like the Ghost Keel and like Shadow Sun, that have 24-inch melter guns. That is something that pushes those weapons up into a really, really good place. It also pushes our plasmas back out to 24 inches, which puts them in a more competitive state. Do I wish the GW just did this base and didn't, just reverted the nerf that they gave us before? Yes, absolutely. But 24-inch plasmas means that they are now more competitive with missile pods, because missile pods going 30 to 36 is great, don't get me wrong. But 24 inches is more getting a buff for the table and not just strictly against the other weapons that it might compete with. And one quick thing that I'm going to inject here in the middle of the video, we have been streaming a lot more at twitch.tv/Pantheon Studios Australia. There's a link down in the description, so go and make sure that you follow that, because there's a lot of streams that you're missing out on where we're playing a bunch of different games, doing talk about lists and tactics and everything else, and you never really know what you're going to miss. We also do, whenever there's a new balanced data slate or new detachments come out, we jump on there and we review them in the same vein that we did during Grotmus. We're doing this more as a full-time thing now. Would really, really love to see you there. Plus, we got a bunch of jumping Tau guy emotes and shit. I've uploaded a shitload of emotes for all of my subs. So come and join us. It's a lot of fun. Now let's talk about the enhancements. All 4 of these enhancements, and I do not say this with any tongue-in-cheek whatsoever, every single one of these can see play. Every single one of these are competitive. There will be different situations where some are better than others, but I love the Supernova, I love the thermoneutronic projector, I love the plasma accelerator, and I love the fusion blades. Even though, yes, I wish that they had melee, I do want to point out that getting melee on Tau is sometimes a lot harder than you might think. Like, Farsight doesn't have a shit melee profile, but he's not included in every list. Getting Tau into melee can actually be incredibly difficult. And a lot of the time, you want to be using your crisis units in a way where your opponent can't interact with them, rather than as a move up, shoot, and charge unit. And there's plenty of instances where we overkill in shooting quite significantly, and your opponent needs to leave out 2 targets, so you shoot and kill one and then you charge into the other. That, and don't forget, commanders aren't hitting on a good number, and there's no way for us to get rerolls on that, so we don't really have a lot of the tools that make melee armies particularly good. I'm actually not upset that they're not melee. I don't think that the framework of 10th is built in a way that would allow Tau melee to shine, similar to how it did within 9th. I think there are too many factors that work against it. Yes, it could be done. Yes, it could be workable. But I think that there is so much working against it, we would need a fundamental restructure of the rules that we interact with in order to make melee for us feel good. And I don't blame GW for not going down that route and delivering us a subpar product, and rather giving us some of the baller rules that we've got on these enhancements. A big one that I want to point out is the Fusion Blades and the Supernova. The Supernova, the AFPs have been in a terrible state ever since Indirect got nerfed for Tau universally. We're paying for the sins of 9th, and in my opinion, rightly so. We were busted, like, to an unfair perspective. Now you've got a weapon that at strength 6, with AP, damage 2, chips off Marines. Normally you expect indirect weapons to chip off little things like Eldari 1-wound models or Imperial Guard or GSC or whatever else. Now you're going to chip off Marines, because even if one goes down, that's still a Marine body that you killed from the other side of a wall. That isn't nothing. And as a direct fire weapon, which is very easy for us to get access to if you put it on a cold star, as a direct fire weapon, this thing is incredible. You put them with fire knives, and all of a sudden you've got 4 rerolls to hit. That means in indirect, you're getting 75% of them through. If you're hitting on 4s, 50% go through on the first roll, and then 50% go through again. That's 75%. Obviously factoring in for variance and bad luck, like this guy. As a direct fire weapon, a blast strength 6 damage 2 weapon goes into a lot of profiles that really don't want to see that. The cyclics are amazing for a reason. Strength 8, AP2, damage 2 is a really great profile. When we could stack 4 of them, you'd have solo commanders running around. This leads to the invariable question, do I think that solo commanders are going to come back into the meta? And the answer is maybe. It depends if the Tau player can make it work. It is another body that, doesn't require guiding because they hit on 3s naturally. They would like guiding for the ignore cover, and they can only take one of these enhancements. But the commanders having access to 2 weapons at damage 2 and not having to go for like a single shot plasma rifle could push them back into the realm of having enough volume to go and take care of backfield objective holders or additional fire from another part of the field. Though it has to be said, with some of the changes to crisis units, before we were only taking 1 big 6 brick and the other commanders could go freely. Now with only taking them in 3s, they definitely get the most out of being in units where they can give assault and 12-inch move, as well as being able to get access to the fire knife rerolls of the Star Scythe AP or the reroll wounds and damage from the Sun Forges. And then the Enforcer being able to give some crisis units, because we may be going more crisis heavy, and you'll see why in a bit. Giving them that minus AP in shooting allows you to weather a bit of return fire. I still think Cold Stars pull ahead in terms of the way that I play the game, which is incredibly fast, incredibly hard hitting, and putting my opponent under a ton of pressure, but there are a ton of play styles that get opened up by both commanders. The Fusion Blades is the other thing that I want to talk about, because when we look at this, you put this on a commander that already has 4 fusion blasters. That means you've got 3 normal fusion shots, and then you've got 2 shots of a weapon that hits obscenely hard. A 2-shot weapon at strength 12 and melter 4? That is potentially a minimum of 10 damage if both of those shots go through, if you roll 2 ones. And that's assuming you don't put it with the Sunforge unit and then be able to re-roll the damage, as well as re-roll that wound roll, which is incredibly nice. There is also another use case that I can see for this, where you don't put them on a Sunforge unit, you put them on a Star Scythe unit. Now, the AP doesn't matter to you, but if you're sending a Star Scythe unit aggressively because you've got burst cannons or flamers, you run up, the flamers kill an infantry unit, and then the commander turns around and just pops a vehicle with 5 melter shots, 2 of which are at melter 4. That could be a really, really obscene thing to do to somebody with a single, relatively cheap point package. And yes, you're suffering from split fire. Yes, you're going to lose stuff on the hit roll, the wound roll, whatever. Nobody's saying that this is going to be insanely easy, but that's the nature of living in a guiding world where we suffer a penalty for split firing. It also could be that you use that flamer unit to guide for somebody else, and then both your units just shoot, and your commander's on 3s. And cover on an AP 5 weapon doesn't really matter. Well, I guess it'd be AP4 because you're shooting at a vehicle, but you get my point. What I love about having these prototype weapons, aside from the callback to Borkhan, which was my favorite sept, 100%. You can actually see I put a video up in the Tau Empire competitive Facebook like years ago now, where I was celebrating September. There were people that were responding to a lot of my posts. This was right before the YouTube video went up, YouTube channel went up. And Borkhan stood out as my favorite 9th edition sept. All of these offer something which is just really great, like a 2-shot plasma weapon that has damage 4, an AP 4, at strength 10. It's 2 shots of a Riptide weapon that's better than the Riptide weapon on a commander. All of this is something which adds to Tau without having to directly compete with anything else. There are no other detachments that give you weapons like this, and the theme is just on point. Then what are we looking at in terms of stratagems? Well, they're all 1 CP, which is great because they're all fantastic. You've got for Battlesuit specifically, you've got a heal and you've got a -1 to wound strat if the strength is higher than your toughness. Now note that that's not just the shooting phase, that is fight phase as well. So you have a defensive layer that when people come in on you, you're potentially making people only ever wound you on 3s or 4s at best. They will always either be winning you on 5s because their strength is less than your toughness, or to be 4s because they're equal to or just a little bit better, will get bumped back to that 4. That is really, really good. That's half of their wound rolls not going through. Then in terms of crisis specific, and bear in mind that when you attach commanders, this doesn't brick that. You've got the cannot be shot outside of 18. This is amazing. Absolutely amazing. One of the big draws of Oxcad is that your crew couldn't be interacted with outside of 18. Your crisis units now can't be sniped cross map from some big scary tank that you've been staying away from after you've blown up all the infantry. That is really, really good. And you can even make somebody not do it because they want to shoot at something else. There's no point going over there because you just spend the CP. Now, there is going to be a lot of skill ceiling on this and knowing when to pop it and when not to, positioning in a way where your opponent doesn't have a lot of good choices, and a lot of the time, people will just get inside that 18. That's going to happen, but as a defensive layer, -1 to wound and cannot be shot outside of 18 has been really, really good in the past for a lot of different things, and now we've got it on crisis suits. One thing I want to point out with the heal, notice that it says command phase, not your command phase, not your enemy's command phase. It just says the command phase. That means you can do it twice in a battle round, which is really, really cool. This obviously puts a highlight on things like ghost kills and broadsides and riptides, but even crisis suits, being able to heal back up chip damage that goes on to them, that normally having 1 suit on 1 wound means it is a death sentence for the next activation. Being able to potentially heal 4 wounds back is a big, big, big deal. And this is a really cool thing where some of the other strats that we're about to talk about force you to take hazardous tests and you can just heal those wounds back up, meaning that that risk-reward playstyle actually gets a little bit safer. Now, the other 3 stratagems are open to all Tau Empire units, so it doesn't matter what they are, everybody can use them. And that is reroll the number of shots. That is give yourself +1 strength, or if you also take -1 AP, you take hazardous as well. Now, there's been a couple of posts saying this is poorly written. I do not think so at all. This is very easy to understand. They're different dot points. You get strength. Now, note that you can't take AP without taking the strength and taking hazardous. It says specifically, increase your strength or improve your strength and AP by 1, and then also gain hazardous. So this is not a take one or the other or take both. This is take strength, and if you want to take AP, then you take the hazardous keyword as well. I really, really like this. There's a lot of breakpoints that really benefit from strength and AP, as we've seen a bunch. Fusion blasters are a really great one just for the strength portion of it, to put them on strength 10. And then we go down to threat assessment analyzer, where threat assessment analyzer is the kind of the opposite, but similar, of the last one that we talked about, where you can choose lethal hits or sustained hits, or choose both and get hazardous. Now, this is really good for a lot of units, but we really, really need to highlight that my beautiful breaches with this, burst cannon, star size, hell, even missile fire knives. Throw in plasma fire knives there as well, because them having sustained and lethal, especially fire knives with 4 rerolls to hit, That is incredible. The breaches throwing 20 or 30 shots, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s if you use stealth suits, and then having full re-rolls to wound mean that you're benefiting from the lethal and the sustained, and then the sustained and normal hit portion of it also having a good chance to go through and wound. This means that armigers need to fear a breacher unit more than they usually do while standing on an objective. Throw into that as well that you have breaches shooting at 16 inches. You can go up to a flamer unit, sit at 13 inches, you can't overwatch me, and then just blow them up. Whereas previously you had to go within that range because their 10-inch blasters facilitated that everything could overwatch you. Now, I want to shine a light on experimental weaponry because this is something that I thought was good at first, and I properly read it off stream. This is before a unit has been selected to shoot, meaning that you spend this CP before you see the number of shots that you've made. Meaning that until you have like 3 or 4 weapons with variable number of shots, this is not worth it. You do not get to see the roll, then choose to spend this. You have to command point and reroll, and even then it's only one of those dice that gets rerolled. This one, if you've got, say, like a flamer unit where you're rolling 6d6 and then potentially a commander with flamers or the supernova or whatever, then it's worth it, because when you're rolling like 6 to 10 dice, you're 100% going to have a failure rate on it. And if you don't, better to spend the CP and not need it than need it and not have spent the CP. Hindsight is 2020. We don't play with hindsight in mind. We play as the math dictates. So just be very careful on that and don't get caught out by it. That could be a very awkward thing. If you didn't know that, you do it in a tournament and then a TO pulls you up on it. That can be, at least a warning at first, but, better to know and not do something improperly because we didn't understand the wording. All right, so with all of that said and that review of the detachment, what are my big winners? The first one 100% has to go to the Ghost Keel. The Ghost Keel having extra range on its weapons, be it either of its 2 weapon profiles, but especially when I look at the Fusion Collider and the Twin Fusion or Flamers. This thing rolling up with a 24-inch melter main gun and an 18-inch shoulder gun, having everything that comes with. The main gun is a 2-shot strength 12 weapon. This thing going to melter at 12 inches means that you can sit just inside of that lone op, kill the target you've got, and then still potentially have other units not getting within that 12 to hit you back. And even when they get there, you can blank 2, you're a 2-up armor save, you stealth, and you can heal in both command phases. This takes Ghost Keels from annoying to what the fuck are you doing to me? Really, really cool. Just be aware if somebody's played around lone op and that sort of stuff before, they will be able to deal with them if you're too cavalier with them. But played well, these guys can be great because they don't only give you that damage, they also give you a lot of mission play. Second one that I want to talk about is a Piranha, and it's Melter 4 weapon, which goes to 18 inches, which is a 9-inch melter, meaning you don't have to get within that 6. You scout 9, move 14, and you are almost assuredly within melter range. This has actually made me consider the multi-Piranha squadrons that you can run, either 2-mans or 3-mans. Now, I don't think going 3 of these is actually the play. As I was talking about on my stream, there are usually 2 lanes of ingress and egress across most tables. And yes, you've got going through the center and all that sort of stuff, but generally speaking, and I especially learned this when I was playing Space Wolves, you want to have those lanes of ingress for some of your big early threats, just to bound down and box everything up. Now, aside from the fact that we're already using Piranhas to jail people, if you've got 2 melter shots and 4 seeker missiles, both of the melter shots at melter 4, and you can pay for +1 strength, that could potentially ding most vehicles in the game. If you've got a squadron of 3, that's 3 melter shots and 6 seeker missiles, just off that one unit for 180 points. That is just a little bit more than a hammerhead, and yes, while the hammerhead has longer range and is able to stay alive for longer, and railguns got a railgun or ion cannons are incredible, that is something that opponents can't really ignore. Now, I won't speak for the rest of the world, but in Australia, I've noticed that our meta is either going to like having a few key Knights players, but a lot of other people going to like transports and MSU, that style. Eldar coming out has definitely made that applicable with things like you need an aspect host, but even things like orcs going in that direction. I think that's not really going to change with the new DACA, the Tactical Brigade, or even just their war hosts that people were using. There's been a ton of that. And when we talk in terms of singles tournaments, you have to play as if you're going to pair into anybody, so you need to have a very, very generalized list. These Piranhas could potentially replace the dedicated anti-tank that you would normally have, not fully, But you wouldn't need to rely on only the bodies of broadsides or hammerheads or whatever else. This, as an early one and done package that just pops a vehicle and then dies in return, but it got a bunch of jailing and battle shocks and everything else out, could be a good way to play, especially given how fast it is, because this detachment does nothing for our speed. It only does things for our survivability or our damage. So leaning into that on already fast units could be a good way to go. The other big winners are invariably the Crisis units. Crisis have gotten a massive uptick with this in terms of having defensive strats, which they don't usually have in a lot of other detachments, and having 2 offensive strats that are like cracked for 1 CP. Really, really good. The initial list that I've been looking at, and if you would like to get access to all of my lists, have a look at the Patreon and look at the Chasseau tier or the Join the Pantheon tier. But my initial brain went to 2 Fire Knife squads, a Starscythe squad, and a Sunforge squad. 3 Cold Stars, and then just the Flamers on their own. Now, the Flamers on their own, go back, you can watch my Starscythe video with Flamers where I talk about all the benefits that they give an army. That is still very, very relevant. It just doesn't have any detachment information in it. But those guys act as a guiding unit. They ignore cover naturally, so they don't need guiding in any capacity whatsoever. They're an Overwatch threat, or they're 110 points, you drop down in a corner and get 5-6 points for your army, which is 100% worth it. But they're not acting alone because you're still going to run Vespid, which is a really, really big deal. And those Vespid have their guns go out an extra 6 inches as well, which means that they can play a dual role of potentially sniping off something your opponent thought was safe, or just going and getting points as they always do through the course of our games. I also think in this detachment, both Farsight and Shadow Sun got a nice little tick up. Shadow Sun with the CP refund, yes, it's not going to happen all the time, but you are going to be spending for strats constantly. This is the 2 big things with OxCAD that I think not enough people pay attention to, is that they have amazing strats and we want to be able to use them. Now, CP Discipline in this detachment are the same as OxCAD, or really any of our other ones where you want to get full value out, will tell the difference between a good and bad Tau player. But even more so in this, where you want to have the heal for the moments you need the heal. You don't want to heal willy-nilly where your unit isn't under threat and you can have them on half health or 1 wound or whatever because there's nothing coming for them. You don't just want to heal it out of nowhere and then not have damage later on. Same, you want to be able to -1 to wound at the right moment so that your opponent has a play fall apart midway. And Farsight, getting a strat for free for his unit can be incredible. The +1 to wound has never been more relevant, especially with some breakpoints going up over wounding on 4s, you then are wounding on 2s. Because when you're above your opponent's strength, you're wounding on 3s, he gives +1, which then goes to 2s. That is not something that you can ignore, and then it also injects a little bit of a melee threat into your army if you can use it effectively. Shadow Sun as well, having a lone op that's -1 to hit, -1 to wound, and can fill in your screening network so that people can't deep strike around the place, is just broadly useful. Now, the big winner, very, very big winner that I want to talk about, and this is especially going into an MSU style of meta, breaches. Breaches. Now, I do think that you're very often going to mount them in Devilfish, but I do see value in having a couple mounted in Devilfish and having one that just foot slogs. We were doing that anyway in Kaoyon or Montcar, where we needed them on the field to give scout moves from the Fireblade or the redeploy from the Fireblade, as we don't really have a ton of great characters to hold those enhancements. You could take a sniper guy, but I just wasn't really feeling that model, even though I know that there were event-winning lists that ran them. I just never fit them into my list. So I was doing that with Fireblades anyway. And having a foot-slogging breacher unit on the board doesn't feel that bad, because with the extra 6 inches of range, you either start them on the board if there's no indirect, or if there is indirect, your opponent is so quick, like Eldari, that they will just flicker jump on top of you and just flame the shit out of them. Start them in the reserve. A unit walking on 10 to 16 inches, being able to shoot somebody, is actually a pretty massive breakpoint. At least I tell my wife 6 inches is important. And I think now more than ever, we're going to be seeing a combined arms list of breaches, crisis suits, and then whatever your flavor is around that. I also think broadsides and the indirect question starts to come up, and that's something that I wanted to flirt with a little bit in a lot of the lists that I've been writing initially. I've got the Supernova going in, because of course I am. Then you've got broadsides, which in any other detachment I wouldn't really feel super good about, But with the meta at the moment, this meta didn't exist when all of our other detachments were mostly in play. And I know that people have gotten value out of indirect, but now with say a 2-squad of broadsides, which we're already seeing before, you've got a bit of anti-tank. Missile sides, I don't know that I would take them because fire knives just do what they do, but cheaper and better. But the twin SMS on 2 models is a lot of indirect shooting. You then have your Devilfish equipped with their SMS, and all of a sudden you've got quite a few pieces that are not only chipping off models from the other side of the wall, but actually potentially doing appreciable damage. And yes, your opponent's going to have cover, and yes, you can spend for the strength and the AP. It may not matter outside of star side units getting additional AP, that sort of thing. But I also think broadsides being able to ignore mortal wounds, this is the first time in the course of the book coming out of the index, and broadsides being able to ignore mortal wounds has actually been relevant. So I guess that's kind of a nice little tick up in their favor. But really, the indirect doesn't seem broken like it was in 9th, but it does seem like in certain lists, it can make it work. It's not going to be in every list, but we've got the option to take it and you won't feel bad taking it. Now, the downside for Devilfish, because they're going to be transporting breaches, normally one of the big strengths of having the gun drones on there is that it gives the Devilfish assault weapons, which means they can advance, have the boys get out, because that's their data sheet ability, then have the Devilfish guide for the breaches to have them on 2s. It gives them a source of assault to be able to guide where it didn't have one before. If you go the SMS, you're opting into that as a game plan and you have to play around it, which means that it's not a misplay to take the SMS, but it is a choice that you're making. So be aware of that before you put the systems on there. And I also don't think that you go the SMS until you're leaning into that on a number of different units. I think if you've only got the Devilfish taking SMS, just go the gun drones. The Devilfish are fast enough to be able to get line of sight on targets. You want to have that emergency guiding at moments that you need it, rather than a tiny bit of chip damage that's backed up by nothing. Last thing I want to talk about is the Flamers. Now, I spoke about this on the Crisis units, but we have to talk about having 18-inch Flamers. You could stand outside of somebody else's Overwatch and threaten them with Overwatch when they move. You can move breaches around other people's Overwatch and then put a Star Scythe unit behind them and say, if you come up to get these guys, I am going to Overwatch you. There is a lot that you can do with this, and having Flamers at 18, burst cannons at 24, missiles at 36. There is just a lot that when you really look into range increases and put them onto relevant tables for some of the highest tier of tournament play that you can have, this detachment starts to look really, really, really good. And can I say, you get it all through the game. What a world where Oxcad, Retaliation Cadre, and Prototype all have their bonuses throughout the game. I guess Crude Hunting Pack does. This is a direction that I would really, really like GW to keep going. And I am the first to jump on GW fucked up and give them shit about it. But genuinely, I think they have been nailing it recently. And this detachment really, really solidifies that for me. Again, I wish they did some fundamental rule changes. If you haven't seen the video where I said GW please fix Tau, that was a little bit of a baity title, but I do think there are some things that need to be fixed. Not that we're broken and unplayable, but there are things to fix. And I don't think we're fine or we're okay is the standard that we should accept. But this new detachment, whoever wrote this understood the assignment. They knew what they were doing, and it shows. I really hope you have fun with the new detachment. Let me know in the comments what you think, if there's anything you think I missed. Obviously, I can't cover everything, otherwise the video would blow out to being ridiculously long and nobody would watch it. But yeah, while you're down there, make sure you leave a comment, like, all that sort of stuff. Or don't. Not your dad. Thank you very much to all of my patrons who make all of my videos possible. If you would like to join them, join the Discord, the community, and get some one-on-one time with me through coaching and whatever, check out the Patreon down in the description. There are a bunch of tiers for a bunch of different people, or check out our website where there are coaching packages you can pick up to get some time with me. All right, from me, Mally, Moo, and Shelly, hope you're all having a wonderful day. For everybody around the world, as everything worsens, I hope you all stay safe, be good to each other, be kind, and we'll see you in the next one to talk about more Prototype Cadre, because I think there's a lot to talk about. See you in the next one, Chassos.